Shout out to Bring Our Q, Julius, you legend. We're going to do a joint interview, yeah? Yeah, we'll do a joint interview, Julius. Thanks for the support. You're a legend. From your girls, Raven and Ellie.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Hector Garcia, on the heels of his big win over Roger Gutierrez, says, with a full training camp, I beat Stevenson, Shakur Stevenson, easier than I beat Colbert and Gutierrez.
You know, Hector Garcia, he's been calling out Shakur Stevenson for a long time, even before this Gutierrez fight.
If Hector Luis Garcia has it his way, he'll face Shakur Stevenson in a 3-belt unification showdown in December. Garcia was in action Saturday night.
Not this past Saturday night, last Saturday night.
This story was published 2 weeks ago when he captured the WBA super featherweight title with a dominant unanimous decision victory over Roger Gutierrez in a Showtime televised match. The win followed up his February breakthrough performance against heavy favorite Chris Colbert. Stevenson holds the WBC and WBO titles and last fought in April when he unified titles against the previously undefeated Oscar Valdez. Next up for the American is a title defense against Robson Conceição on September 23rd in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah, I saw a quote from Shakur Stevenson saying that beyond that Conceição fight,
beyond that title defense, unless it's going to be for a unification match, he doesn't look to be fighting at 130 pounds in the near future.
That's what he said a few weeks ago.
The 30-year-old Garcia is trained by Bob Santos and fights under the PBC banner, while Stevenson is promoted by Top Rank. In recent years, the two rival companies have worked together more frequently. They came together to co-promote the second and third fights between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, and also reached agreements for Artur Beterbiev to face his mandatory challenger, Marcus Brown, and Terence Crawford to face his respective mandatory challenger, Sean Porter. Garcia hopes that he can fight Stevenson before the end of the year. Shakur said that he wants to be an undisputed champion, and he can't do that without facing me, Garcia stated. He just beat Valdez, who was still a featherweight, last year. He has never fought a fighter like me. I beat a full-fledged, undefeated super featherweight with less than 3 weeks' notice against Colbert, and I only trained for 5 weeks for Roger Gutierrez, who was a champion. Stevenson wouldn't have risked taking any of those fights under those circumstances.
Seems like Hector Garcia is undermining Shakur Stevenson's resume.
His dominant victory over Chris Colbert and his more recent victory over reigning WBA champion Roger Gutierrez, in my humble opinion, pale in comparison to Shakur's victory over Oscar Valdez. What Hector's not saying...
Shakur's victory over Jamel Herring is better than his victory over Chris Colbert because Chris Colbert wasn't proven.
Chris Colbert, unbeaten fighter that he might have been, he wasn't a champion. Jamel Herring was, and he actually defended that title successfully more than once. You think about the Oscar Valdez fight, yeah, Oscar Valdez was a featherweight that moved up to super featherweight, but he beat the number one super featherweight in Miguel Berchelt, who reigned as that division's WBC champion for a very long time. I'd say beating Oscar, who beat Berchelt, is better than beating Roger.
What's Roger's biggest victory?
They said Colbert was too fast and too defensive for me, and that Gutierrez had too much experience and power. But look what I did to them. And I didn't have a full training camp. I promise that with a full training camp, I will beat Stevenson easier than I beat them.
Shakur Stevenson, in many ways, is the most recognizable face and the most recognizable fighter.
The most recognizable champion in today's super featherweight division. He is at least more recognizable than Hector Garcia, this division's reigning WBA champion, and he is somewhat more recognizable than Joe Cordina, the newly crowned IBF champion. So you can understand why Hector is calling him out. Unless we forget, Shakur Stevenson is this division's #1 ranked super featherweight, in possession of the Ring Magazine title. When he fought Oscar Valdez, that was the #1 guy at this weight versus the #2 guy.
It's understandable why Hector's calling him out, but let's call a spade a spade. Hector's a PBC fighter.
More importantly, Shakur Stevenson is a flagship fighter over there at Top Rank, whereas Hector is not. He's not a flagship fighter for the PBC, because what flagship fighter...
Remember, he took the Chris Colbert fight on short notice, and he only had 5 weeks to prepare for this fight, this Roger Gutierrez fight.
Generally speaking, flagship fighters don't take fights on short notice, and flagship fighters, they get full camps. Shakur Stevenson is a flagship fighter, and that's saying that PBC's investment in the career of Hector Garcia is not akin to Top Rank's investment in Shakur Stevenson. They've got big plans for Shakur, but what does the PBC have planned for Hector? The most amicable solution here would be for the PBC to send Hector over to Top Rank for this unification match, because if they don't, what have they got planned for him?
There were 2 alphabet titles on the Top Rank side of things and 1 alphabet title on the Matchroom side of things.
If you're not going to pay out what you need to pay out to bring those fighters over, not that I think that they are, what are they going to do for Hector? What are you going to have him do? Fight the guys you've got at 126 at 130? Or are you going to move him up to 135 so that he can be an opponent for Gervonta Davis or someone like that? I mean, really think about this situation for what it is. Hector Garcia may have very well hit his stride, and he's racking up some career best wins. That's what he's doing.
But what does the PBC actually have in store for him?
Now, this article talks about how Marcus Brown, a PBC fighter, crossed over to Top Rank for his title shot against Artur Beterbiev. But what they're leaving out is that the PBC didn't have any options for Marcus. There were no other fights to make for that fighter, so if he wanted a title shot, it's not like he had a choice.
What are you going to do? You're going to hardball these guys and let this go to a purse bid?
You're going to go to a purse bid so you can win the rights for a fight that in all likelihood your fighter is going to lose.
And when he loses, you're in the hole whatever you paid to get the rights for this thing. And Artur goes back to Top Rank.
I'm pretty sure that's why the people at the PBC elected to simply send Marcus over to Top Rank. It was a cheaper alternative. They didn't really have much of a choice. You don't want to get into a bidding war for a fight that your fighter, in all likelihood, is going to lose. And when he loses, you will have gotten nothing out of it. It's not that high profile a fight.
It's not some big money fight to where you want to win the rights because you expect to turn over a profit. It was a pretty ho-hum affair.
Bringing Artur over to your side of things would have been an expensive proposition, and even if you could afford to bring him over, your fighter still stands a good chance of losing. Artur's going to end up going back to the Top Rank side of things, so why overpay?
So yeah, they sent Marcus over to Top Rank, but it's because they didn't have much of a choice.
And it was more or less the same situation with Sean Porter, who was Terrence Crawford's WBO mandatory challenger while Terrence was still under contract with Top Rank. They elected to send Sean Porter over because Sean Porter was at the end of his career. He already fought all the guys on the PBC side of things. So why pay out more cash?
Why would they have paid out big cash to bring Terrence over to their side of things when Terrence was still under contract with Top Rank?
They didn't throw a bunch of money at that situation. They didn't throw any money at it at all because Sean was approaching the end of his career. Terrence Crawford was still under contract with Top Rank, so you might as well just send Sean over. It's the cheaper alternative. So I reiterate, while they might have sent Marcus Brown over to Top Rank and Sean Porter over to Top Rank, it's because
they didn't have much of a choice. You're going to burn through millions of dollars trying to put on that fight?
I feel there's a very similar dynamic here when it comes to Hector Garcia. Now, Hector, unlike Sean Porter and unlike Marcus Brown, he's an unbeaten fighter, whereas when those fighters crossed over, they had already suffered 1 or 2 losses.
Hector hasn't, not yet, and Hector's a champion.
Hector's got a belt. When Sean Porter and Marcus Brown crossed over to the Top Rank side of things, they weren't champions. They didn't have a belt. Hector does. But Hector,
if he doesn't cross over to Top Rank for this unification fight, what are his options?
you say that you don't want to just send one of your unbeaten champions over to some other side of the street. Well, all right, what have you got planned for him? If you're not going to do that, what can you put him in that would be the equivalent of a Shakur Stevenson fight? What have you got?
I feel like the most amicable solution here would be to send Hector to Top Rank.
But because he's an unbeaten fighter, and because he's an unbeaten champion, I question whether or not the PBC will elect to do that.
Hector himself has been calling out Shakur Stevenson for months.
But the PBC aren't likely to pay out big cash just to bring Shakur Stevenson over to their side of things, and I'm pretty sure Top Rank, they're not going to want him to go over there.
Of course not. He's one of their flagship fighters.
So in a nutshell, I don't know that this fight, this unification match between them, is ever going to happen. The most amicable solution would be to send Hector over to Top Rank.
But then you have to wonder, what does Hector want for the fight? How much money does he want to make?
What does he want for that fight? And is it a dollar amount that Top Rank would be willing to pay out? There seem to be a myriad of problems, a myriad of potential issues in association with this unification match that, at least from where I'm sitting, make it unlikely. unlikely to happen.
Which is unfortunate because it's a unification match and stylistically, it makes for an interesting fight.
Two unbeaten champions in today's super featherweight division, one guy being the boxer, the other being the puncher. The classic stylistic matchup.
It's a great fight, but I don't think it's likely to happen.
In men's super lightweight news, a very similar situation to the situation we just discussed. Newly crowned WBA champion Alberto Puello wants Teofimo Lopez showdown next. And Alberto, like Hector,
He's a WBA champion, he's a PBC fighter.
He, like Hector, has his sights set on a guy over there at Top Rank. Coincidence?
Are you noticing a pattern?
Alberto La Vispa Puello made history Saturday night in Hollywood, Florida, last Saturday. Puello captured the WBA super lightweight title with a split decision victory over Batirzaran Akhmedov.
With the victory, Puello became the first super lightweight champion in the history of the Dominican Republic.
Puello is very proud of this accomplishment.
Him and Hector are both from the Dominican Republic.
It is something that I have dreamed of since I was a kid. Akhmedov is a great fighter and proved a great challenge. I am happy to not only win this title for myself, but for my country.
Are you noticing that both Hector Garcia and Alberto Puello are Dominican nationals?
And are you noticing that they're both newly crowned WBA champions, unbeaten champions?
A lot of people suspect that the PBC has a rather unethical relationship with the WBA.
And are you noticing that they're both calling out top-ranked fighters, fighters that are on the quote-unquote other side of the street?
It's almost like they're being coaxed. It's almost like they're being coached to do this.
Our country received two new champions with my win and Hector Luis Garcia's win, Puello told BoxingScene.com.
The WBA title has landed on the shores of PBC Island, as has the IBF title, the Red Belt.
Very soon, Argentina's own Jeremiah Ponce will take on Puerto Rico's own Subriel Matias for the newly vacated Red Belt. That's two alphabet titles that have washed up on the shores of PBC Island, and at least
maybe we can get a unification match out of this, a good one.
But as far as unifying the division and crowning the next super lightweight undisputed champion, this is a division that will stay divided. I said that before, and I'm saying it here and now. I'm saying it again.
What do you think? The PBC's just going to send Alberto Puello to Top Rank?
Is that what you're expecting? The 28-year-old hopes to build off of his momentum and land an even bigger fight in his next ring appearance with former undisputed and current WBO IBF champion, not anymore, Josh Taylor. Tied up with a rematch against Jack Catterall in the fall, Puello would like a showdown against former unified lightweight champion Teofimo Lopez before the end of the year. Lopez made his super lightweight debut earlier this month with a knockout victory over Pedro Campa. I would love to fight Tosh Jailer and unify titles, but I understand he is fighting Jack Casserole again. Since he's busy, Teofimo should fight me. I have a belt and he wants to be a two-division champion, so I am the only other person he can fight to make that happen. He has been barking about becoming undisputed at 140, so he should have no problem fighting me next. And in truth, if they could make the fight,
I like the fight.
If they can make the fucking fight, I love the fucking fight. I wouldn't mind seeing Teofimo Lopez take on a newly crowned, unbeaten champion at 140 pounds in Alberto Puello, but my many years as a boxing fan have made me cynical.
Puello says he'll fight him anytime, any place, anywhere.
But the plan now is for Puello to take a couple of weeks off and then get right back in the gym and wait to get a date for his next assignment. I don't want to be out of the ring too long. I will take a short break and then start training again. I like to always be in shape. You never know when an opportunity will present itself, and you have to be ready at all times. He doesn't want to be out of the ring too long, he says.
And you're with the wrong outfit, my friend.
We'll see how long it takes the PBC to get Alberto Puello another fight date. And
because there's another alphabet title over there on PBC Island,
and because the fight for it is set to go down real soon, I wonder if Alberto Puello will keep the same energy for the winner of that fight, that champion, that he currently has for a fighter who's not fighting on the same side of the street as he is. I mean, wasn't it the PBC? Wasn't it Errol Spence Jr. that told Terrence Crawford back when he was with Top Rank that he was on the wrong side of the street? Well, doesn't that apply here?
Teofimo Lopez is with Top Rank. Tosh Jailer is with Top Rank.
Is that not a thing anymore? This ain't your father's era of boxing, and call-outs aren't what they used to be. Your average call-out these days is little more than an idle threat. A dry threat that...
It's nothing.
Oftentimes doesn't result in anything, doesn't even result in a fight. And you are talking about a PBC fighter on the PBC side of things targeting a fight with two top-ranked fighters. You're telling me there aren't going to be issues. There aren't going to be problems. It's not a coincidence that Hector Garcia, the lesser-known Hector Garcia, is calling out Shakur Stevenson. And it's not a coincidence that Alberto Puello, in spite of being a newly crowned champion, is calling out a more well-known fighter in Teofimo Lopez and Tosh Jailer. And it's not a coincidence that both of those guys are top-ranked fighters. These are not coincidences.
Most of the recognizable names, the recognizable fighters, are on the top-ranked side of things.
They are. Tosh Jailer, Teofimo Lopez, Jose Ramirez, Jose Zapata, Jose Pedraza.
Jack Catterall just jumped into bed with Sky Sports, and Sky Sports is in bed with Top Rank.
The money fights, the fights of some value, they actually involve top-ranked fighters, at least at 140 pounds. Alberto Puello, newly crowned champion, God bless him, nobody knows the man.
He might have a belt at this weight, but he's not a marquee fighter. Far from it.
He's not a flagship fighter. Not for the PBC, but Teofimo Lopez and Tosh Jailer, those are flagship fighters for Top Rank. So... would Alberto Puello and his team and his handlers be willing to send him over?
You know the answer.
I mean, it's not that I don't want them to fight. I'd love to see Puello versus Lopez for the WBA title at 140 pounds. But let's be honest here. Let's be realistic. You think the PBC is just going to send one of their unbeaten champions over to Top Rank? Is that how they do things?
Is that what you're expecting?
I can't help but think that this is just promotion by way of name association, that these fighters may be coaxed, maybe even coached, to call out these guys that are over there at Top Rank, knowing they have no intention of fighting them. They have no intention of crossing over to Top Rank and ESPN, but they'll call them out.
Knowing they aren't going to fight him. Knowing they're not going to cross over.
I feel like Alberto Puello would sooner end up facing Gary Antoine Russell, his PBC stablemate, on his own side of things before he'd make the decision to cross over and take on a Teofimo Lopez or unify titles with a Tosh Jailer.
He'd sooner fight Gary Antoine Russell. He'd sooner end up unifying titles with the winner of Jeremias Ponce versus Subriel Matias.
To be honest, I got no problem with those fights, but those fights don't have the profile that a Lopez fight would have, or a Taylor fight would have. So the only way they can hope to get those fights a profile is to call out those more high-profile fighters that are on another side of the street, knowing they're not going to fight them.
And if you're calling out a guy knowing you're not going to fight him, what are you really doing?
It's clout chasing. If you know in your heart of hearts you're not actually looking to fight that guy and that fight won't get made, but you're still name dropping him, you're doing it
because you're clout chasing.
That's what it is. The PBC has two unbeaten fighters, two newly crowned champions that really don't have much of a profile. And what fights they can make internally, they still won't get those fighters much of a profile. So what they can hope to do in a situation like that is have those fighters call out somebody else's fighter, somebody else's fighter that actually has a profile, knowing they're not going to send these guys over.
Batten down the hatches and get ready for a shitstorm, because that's what the conversation is going to be.
That's what the conversation will devolve into. We're not going to be talking about a fight or fights that are set to go down. We're going to be talking about why these fights aren't happening. And some people, some content creators, they thrive off of that. The division in these divisions, the politics of boxing.
As a boxing fan, I would much rather they be fighting.
And I would much rather be talking about a fight than the politics that prevent one. But I don't expect to see Alberto Puello share the ring with Teofimo Lopez. I don't.